Welcome to another episode of Successfully Live. I'm your host, Adam O'Donnell, the co-founder of Successfully. Today, I'm excited to be here with Carolee Gearhart. Today, our topic is knowing who is your village.
It's a topic I'm really passionate about, Adam. And for me, people talk a lot about it takes a village. And certainly in customer success, everybody knows how important it is to have a team. And I think when you say, so it takes a village, but for me, it's really about knowing who that village is. And a big part of customer success is making sure that you actually have the whole organization embracing and involved in that process. And so for me, that's one of the topics that I'm probably most passionate about. And that in my experience, particularly adaptive, that executive management team and being part of that team and having them engaged in in customer success is really the key part of being successful.
I love it. It's more than just customer success is not just a customer success department.
Absolutely.
It's the entire company. So, I mean, how would you kind of break that down in terms of like the components of knowing your village?
Yeah. So, I mean, so one of the things that I think about is when we talk to our team, one of the things is the element of there is you being an advocate within the customer for your company, but then our job is sort of being an advocate for the customer within the company. And I think everyone in customer success kind of gets and they feel like, yeah, that's a part of their role. But sometimes folks, I'll hear as I go and talk to other folks, there can be a little bit of, almost sort of borderline whining around, people do or don't get that engaged around what the customers are doing or what they need from the rest of the organization. And I really view that that's a key part of you're missing something in customer success if you don't see part of your role as being, I've got to figure out how to engage the rest of the organization around that. And so when I think about those teams, and certainly sitting on the executive management team and looking around the table, whether it's, of course, there are natural ones like professional services. You say, like, it's clear what they would be doing that would be involved in, or if you're implementing through partners, what they would be doing to be involved in the success of your customers. But even teams like, when I sit across from the CFO, the way in which we choose to invoice impacts how customers feel about us. The way in which we, from an HR perspective, when I look at sort of our head of HR and say, who are the people we're hiring, what's important to them is key in terms of what our customer experience is like. And so that element of thinking about, okay, as I look around the table, how do I engage each of those groups in understanding the role that they play as customers? And that's the role that, whether you're the leader or you're a CSM who's managing a particular set of accounts, your job is how do I make sure I convey what the customer experience is back and how do I get them engaged on it?
What's the first step that I should take when day one, VP of customer success, I'm trying to get the whole team involved, just the whole company on the same page? What's that first step?
One, it is a quarterly practice. It's with the executive management team, and then it's going out to each of their teams. And so that's been one of the things that was really a game changer for us. It is not just at the executive level, them knowing and seeing where NPS was, but we made the decision to add a second set of questions around NPS. It's just one sort of question 2, but that literally has all of those different areas. What is their experience from a sales perspective, from a marketing perspective, and allowing them to rate and provide feedback on those other areas. And what that allowed us to do is then to be able to go back to those teams and say, here's what customers are saying about your particular group. And so we do that on a quarterly basis with each of those teams. And now those various groups have someone who is basically a customer lead, which is another thing that I'd really suggest folks think about doing, is having someone who in a particular organization owns kind of the interface with customer success. And that also is the person that we would pull into calls when we follow up with customers on their feedback. One of the things that's super important, of course, is the follow-up on detractors and the speed with which you do follow up and reach out to them. And so when we get something that's about a particular area, we'll call in, hey, Adam, you're in marketing. They had some not great feedback around our last event. You're going to pop on the phone with us.
Just letting them be aware of it, and then like keeping that accountability in terms of like, you're going to have to answer to this. We're not going to be the only ones who are sitting here. Like, we're going to talk, and it provides a better experience to the customer. Before we kind of dive into that, I was going to just know like technologies that you're using to do this, so we can like tactically like try to begin this? Is it a specific NPS tool that you're using? And kind of how does that survey look?
We've chosen to implement Gainsight, and we've actually been using the NPS capability within Gainsight to do that. And that's been super helpful to help us also holistically view the customer. We spent a fair amount of time drilling into what are the components of an account's health, overall health. NPS just being one of those segments, and they're weighted, and we've done some trending over time to kind of evaluate the weighting, and do we think it ties back to their churn rate or sort of retention rate that we look at overall. And so we use Gainsight, and that allows us to feed that information back to, of course, all of the CSMs, but then we actually drop that in and do a bunch of reporting off of that as well.
Got it. And so when they get that NPS survey, like when they had a challenge with it, do you suggest, like, was this a marketing problem? Was this a product problem? Was this an engineering? Like, in terms of customer facing?
Yeah, sure. What the customers get, what we chose to do was we have one question that's the NPS, standard NPS question. And then there's a secondary question that says, basically, what is your level of satisfaction with these different areas? And so they can rate on sort of a 1 to 10 of where they're at, and they can add a comment if they want to, or they can just score the various areas. And there's 8 areas that we cover that basically represent the whole organization. And then there's other commentary they add. We've played a lot with it because we want to make sure our response rates are good. And they've actually been trending, improving over time, which is great. But we wanted to get a little more information that would allow us to do this piece that I'm talking about, which is really this element of sort of getting the broader organization involved. So being able to show them their own trend line over time has really been impactful. And so we report that to the whole organization, and then the customer lead is a part of that presentation. And that customer lead is someone who will have been on some of the calls if we got some feedback that we pulled into, and they can actually speak to it. So it's someone within their team too who's giving them feedback on what that customer has or hasn't said. One of the other key takeaways has been everyone in customer success wants their whole organization engaged with those customers. All of us are really passionate about wanting our customers to get more of what they're looking for, more of what they're asking for. And the art is really, how do we get that from those organizations? And so there's one piece that says, okay, all of us go back and we tell them things. I think the value out of an NPS and some consistent scoring allows this trending over time. It also is a way of consolidating feedback, because one of the things that happens is sometimes when we have a very noisy customer on a particular topic, it may or may not be as broadly applicable or relevant. What you really want in customer success is the organization working on what are the most important challenges that more customers, right, that can kind of raise the waterline for everybody. And so the survey vehicle has been a good vehicle to kind of figure out what are those like waterline elements that really impact everybody. And then to be able to, what I wanted to double click on is bringing somebody from that organization in on the call with the customer and engaging directly with the customer. So we're able to more selectively bring the right people in and engage on the customer. That's not just a particular customer escalation that may or may not be as relevant to everybody, but we're looking at all the feedback and able to pull them in on a call that we know impacts a lot of different customers. And the amount of commitment that you get from someone, when they've actually spoken on the phone, been there, had to talk to that customer, is completely different than when I go and just try to tell them, hey, it's really important to this customer. When they walk away and the customer said, hey, are you going to do this? And they say, yeah, we're going to be working on that. Their level of commitment is completely different than when they're just talking to someone internally. And that's been a big part of this piece, is they actually feel like, oh no, I know that person. There's somebody who and certainly in CS, I would just encourage people to not get too focused on the aspect of sort of, I own the customer. Sure, I want the CSMs to be like, I'm responsible for this customer. I need to make sure they're successful. But I think sometimes you can almost go too far on that like ownership spectrum, because the thing is really is like everyone in the company, you want them to feel that sort of level of commitment. And our job isn't to be gatekeepers, it's to be door openers, really is the way I think about it. So trying to open the door to as many people within the organization. And as you do that, you get the rest of the organization more engaged with and bought in on solving those customer problems.
How do you prioritize what feedback you should go to that marketing person or that salesperson or that engineering person and get them on the phone.
So what we do is, one, of course, we actually is read and digest all of the feedback that we're getting from customers. And so back over to the part where I think the responsibility really lies with also the CS leadership. So each of the CSMs are responsible for their individual accounts, but the leadership team within your CS organization needs to be looking at all of that feedback, kind of digesting and collating that and looking at each of the teams. And so trying to understand, okay, and sometimes in a particular quarter, we'll notice there'll be some topic that's more of a hot topic for that particular quarter, but looking at what are the things that we see consistently sort of over time. And when we're pulling together, we actually do like a formal PowerPoint presentation to these orgs that says, here's the feedback, here's the rating. Typically we'll close with quotes, literal quotes, on that section of a slide of here's some of the quotes from those customers. They also have access to, we give them, I'm a huge believer in open kimono. Here's all the raw data. If you want to go search through it, we've digested it. We've tried to make it, easy for you guys to understand and segmented what looks like the priorities. But if you want to dig into it, feel free to. And it's funny, actually, you'll find probably no surprise to you guys, but the developers go way in. They want to look at every single, and somebody who's, in a particular area is looking at theirs in much more detail. The marketing folks are like, all fine with the 3-slide presentation. They're good to go. So, but really, again, huge believer, share all the information, but your job as a part of the CS leadership, I view our responsibility is really trying to look through that and say, okay, what are the most important things? And where do I think what is the thing likeliest to raise the waterline for a bigger organization? And those in particular, we will try to pull in members from those teams on. Now, in some cases on the product side, if it's product management, we will bring them in on specific calls that may be more specific to that particular customer. But again, we try to do ones that are likelier that we hear consistently across multiple customers. And that's one of the things that's a great example of thinking about in customer success. And particularly if you're in a startup SaaS environment, there's a lot of push and naturally slow to add new features that'll help you sell more customers. And certainly existing customers may have, hey, I really want this or that incremental feature. But one of the things that can also happen is a component of your product may be mostly there, but not quite. And it'll be one of the things that it won't impact a sales cycle, because you can say, yes, we have this. But if the way in which the customers engage with that, it's too clicky or it doesn't quite do what they really wanted to do, it's really important to make sure product management hears that, because it's one of the things that probably going to be less likely to get pushed to finish that out if you're just thinking new business acquisition. But if you're thinking about the customers, it may be something that's really impactful. And again, our job is to make sure they understand those customers, referenceability, excitement about our product, viability are what's going to drive also new customer acquisition. So I think that becomes a really important thing in finishing out. Many times there are pieces about the way the customers actually use the product, which may not be quite as product management envisioned. They had this is what we thought the customer was going to want to do, but then we actually see what they're doing with it and it's slightly different. And that does impact the way in which we should sort of think going forward.
Could you kind of give us more details on how you're actually keeping them updated and making them feel that accountability as a department?
We do literally give them a departmental NPS score. Here's what you're getting. And here's what it's looked like sort of over the last number of quarters for your particular team. And each of the presentations we try to close with, here were the most important priorities that we heard, and try to make it 3 usually of what we heard from customers about your particular area. And I think, again, it's really customer success responsibility to make that feedback clear, relevant to them, and actionable. And so that's really what we try to close with. Out of all of the things that they're working on or could be doing, here's the things that we think would be most impactful to the customers that their team could be working on. So we do go back to them and provide them some feedback on what customers have said over time about particular areas and where we've done better. Or in some cases, there's things that we thought this was the action that was going to create an outcome, but we don't seem to notice much of a difference. And then sometimes we'll go back to the same customer again, say, hey, we did this. What do you think? And try to understand, did that really fit the bill or not?
I love it. Are you bringing those kind of calls, like those customer update calls? Are you bringing the person in the company?
We absolutely are. And it's one of the things that's great. Again, we talked a little bit about tools that we use, and for us in terms of Gainsight and tracking. So being able to track the outcome of those calls, know who we spoke to, and be able to go back to them. So that's really important. And again, because sometimes there's what we think is going to have an impact, and then there is what really does have an impact. That consistency can be really important. It's one of the things that's been interesting too out of the feedback. Customers, again, your job is to open doors within the organization for the customer. And the more people they talk to, frankly, the more invested they start feeling as well. And that's been one of the things of even customers who come in as detractors. Some of the most impactful things we've noticed is one, the speed with which we get back to them. So that we get that feedback and right away someone reaches out to them. But then it's even more impactful when we are pulling in someone from another part of the organization and say, hey, we saw you were particularly unhappy with ABC, right? And in a particular area, whether it's a product area, and we have the product manager on the line with us. And we wanted to talk a little bit more about your feedback, not because necessarily we're going to resolve it right away. And I think that would be one of the other really big learnings is simply reaching out to them, talking to them about it. You don't have to be afraid. Do we have the answer? Can we completely resolve it? It's that we heard what you said, right? And here, either we're thinking about it, here's what we're doing. And in some cases, there's lots of feedback that we get that's not directly resolvable or actionable in any sort of short or medium term time frame. But the customers inevitably feel better just to have talked to you about it, and they know it's on the path. And I think that's one of the things when I think about in terms of engaging with your CSMs, that team of making sure they know you don't have to necessarily be able to fix every problem to have a happy customer. What you've got to show the customers that you care, that you're committed to them, that you're thinking about where they're trying to go, and that we're working there over long term. People know that people make mistakes, products aren't perfect, they'll evolve over time, but they really want to feel heard. And the degree to which you get more of the organization hearing them and engaged on that, I think the more successful you'll be.
So what's your cadence on communicating with the customer and getting that feedback from the customer? Are you doing it quarterly? Are you doing it monthly? Is it ongoing?
Yeah. So of course I'm expecting the CSMs are engaged on a regular basis with their customers, and we have different sort of tiering and sort of a level of expectation. I consider a service level agreement that we make internally around different sized customers. So part of that feedback, I expect the CSMs, and we actually do talk about with the whole CSM team. We do a debrief after each MPS. So everyone who's got unhappy customers, basically, or customers that have turned up as a detractor, we get on a call with them as a group and internally and talk about what was the feedback that you got. Again, helping us to make sure we're distilling what are the most common pieces of feedback, how do people handle those things so that the rest of the CSM team can learn from that as well. So we do that on a quarterly basis because we do MPS on a quarterly basis, but each customer once a year. So we're doing tranches of customers. But again, incorporated in that where I'm expecting they're providing other feedback that customers are getting or giving them along the way.
What's one piece of advice that you would give someone who's about to start implementing a program of feedback that connects the whole organization?
I think the one piece of feedback or suggestion I'd give to anyone who is heading down this path is to keep in mind that it does need to be clear, relevant, and actionable to the particular audience. And so there's a lot of feedback that you get from customers, but if they can't understand what that feedback is in relationship to their day job, you won't get the engagement from them that you want. And I think, again, for me, a good example of that was around the CFO and thinking about the finance organization, who don't really think of themselves typically as customer facing. And so with them, being able to talk to them a little bit about the feedback that customers get based on what their bill looks like, for example, and sort of how they engage with it and how they understand that was a thing that was a real light bulb moment for the finance organization, and sort of getting an understanding, hey, what they're doing is impacting customers on a day-to-day basis. But it isn't something that came out of just the big picture MPS. score, right? How would they affect that? And when our company says, oh, we're trying to make customers happy, they're not building the product, they're not selling the product, they're not implementing the product. And so you really want to make sure that when you're meeting with a particular audience, you're talking about what will be impactful for them, what is the role, and help them to see that.
That's wonderful. I mean, Carolee, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adam.
Definitely another great episode of Successfully Live.